Hey, my name is Maestro Robinson. I am a professional drummer based in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Maestro, you've toured with artists such as Selena Gomez, Lil Nas X, Billy Ray Cyrus, and Keith Urban. Do you prefer life on the road or playing in a Las Vegas residency?
That's a great question. I prefer a Las Vegas residency because I'm able to play the show. It feels like a tour. It feels like everything I've done in my career thus far. But at the end of the night, I get to go home, which is awesome. And that by far beats going back to a tour bus or a hotel. So I like the residency, and I'm able to live here and actually get acclimated to the town and be a local. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's the best of both worlds for sure.
Yeah.
How would you describe your drumming style?
My drumming style is definitely church influenced. I'm very, very careful not to call myself a gospel drummer because I feel like when you do that, it sort of opens up a different portal, and you can get a little pigeonholed, if you really get specific like that. But I did grow up in church, so my playing has that raw energy that I've been able to incorporate in every professional situation, and it's desired, it's needed. The artists that I work with and the projects that I get on, they want that. So gospel influence, so that includes, funk, soul, hip hop, anything that kind of has an urban feel to it. That's my background and that's what I bring. Even if I'm playing something that's not necessarily urban, I'll still bring that influence to the song and just to make it feel, make it feel a little better.
Do you have any other drummers or artists that have influenced that style?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of my top influences include Teddy Campbell. He's one of my favorite drummers of all time. Dave Weckl, Steve Gadd. There's a drummer named Billy Ashbaugh, who's one of my favorites ever, ever, ever. He played with NSYNC back in the day. He was their drummer. I've learned a lot from him, and his feel is incredible, incredible. I try to pick from everybody. There's so many great drummers out there, and everyone has a unique voice. So I love those guys, and even some of my own just personal friends in my generation are some of my favorite drummers too. Brooke Alexander, who's out with Benson Boone right now. Gerard Sullivan, who's out with Janet Jackson. He's a good friend, and all these guys are they're killing. They're just killing the game. Q Robinson is another one of my favorites. We call each other cousins because we share a last name. And he's like family. We're really good friends. But Q is out right now with Hamilton, the touring cast of Hamilton, and he's out there just destroying everything too. So all these guys definitely influence, and I take from all of them and I incorporate it into what I do, and it's a beautiful thing.
You have both acting and musical performance credits to your name. Growing up in Los Angeles, did you always want to be an actor and a musician?
Growing up in LA, it was more so music when I was coming up as a kid and as a teenager and even, young adulthood. It was just music. Acting didn't hit me really until I moved to Boston. Ironically, I was in Boston to study music, and I got bit by the acting bug while I was in Boston. Boston's not really a place you pursue acting, but that's where the bug sort of bit me. And when I moved back to LA, that's when I started to pursue both music and acting. But by that point, I think I was 19, 20 years old when I started to pursue both. But growing up, it was just music. I wanted to play drums. I wanted to go on tour. I mentioned Billy Ashbaugh just a minute ago. Billy Ashbaugh was the first drummer I saw on television playing a giant arena during a tour. And I thought that was the most amazing. I'm like, how do you get into that? I want to do that. So it was definitely pursuing music. But it's interesting because I didn't realize really where I was. Like I'm in this hub for entertainment, and it's in Los Angeles, but I didn't realize that I was really in the mecca of pursuing this particular type of industry until I moved out and I went to Boston. I went to Berklee College of Music and I went to study music there. And I remember talking to a few of my, comrades there and some of the students, and everyone tells each other where they're from and all of that. And I remember telling people that I was from LA, and they all looked at me like, well, what are you doing here? I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. It wasn't until I moved back where I was like, "Oh, okay, this is where you pursue it." But I wasn't ready yet. I was young. There were things I still needed to learn and get a grasp on before I really started to pursue it.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine being too young to go into clubs and maybe being surrounded in the church. Your parents aren't pushing you to go, into that scene too hard necessarily. And it isn't until you're outside and you're able to kind of grow and you start that network. And then you
Yeah.
realize the network is the opportunity maybe. What are some specific attributes of Berklee that prepared you to be a professional drummer?
So when I was at Berklee, a lot of what I learned and what I still use today was what I learned from the students. If you can believe that, a lot of the students who came in there to study really didn't need to be there in terms of academics and being good with their instrument, whether it be an instrument or a voice. A lot of these students are already phenomenons. They can read music like a newspaper. They can outplay everybody, and a lot of times they're better than the professors. So I learned a lot from my fellow students, classmates. Berklee was where I learned to really play with the click. I hadn't really done too much of that when I was home, growing up, just practicing in the garage. I would play the music. I would put a record on and I would play to that and I would lock in with the drummer on the record. But I wasn't really hip to, I didn't have that yet. And I remember the first time I was playing with the click with my fellow students, and I crashed and burned a couple times. I really had to figure out, like, oh, wow, there's a lot of space in between these clicks. Like, I really need to practice that. And not even just a click track, but a loop, playing to loops and sequencers and 808s and triangles. And, I played with an R&B artist while I was at Berklee. And the music director, who's a good friend of mine, his name is Andre Brown, he would make the tracks, the loops for me to play to. And they were 808s, triangles, and shakers, with all of this space in between. So I had to learn how to really lock into that. And it took some time and some practice, but those moments were gold for me because I was able to take those opportunities and those experiences, bring them back to LA. And now I have that to add, to my bag of, tricks, if you will. And yeah, that was great for me. And even learning from other guys. When I was at Berklee, it was 2007, 2008, and this was the height of the gospel chops movement. So a lot of the syncopated stuff that drummers do on the kit, that was really starting to be wanted and accepted in the community, especially because now this is the era of video phones and everything's being recorded, and YouTube is really popular now, and everything is on video. So that movement really, really blew up, and a lot of these guys who came from Connecticut or Philly or New York, that whole East Coast side, they brought this fire with them to school. I didn't necessarily have that growing up on the West. So I was able to come on the East Coast and learn from these guys, and wow, this is what you're doing with the paradiddle? I didn't know you can do that. So I learned a lot from that, and I was able to take that with me back to LA too.
So after you moved back west, when was, what would you say, kind of your first break? Was there an opportunity, or was there a moment you're like, oh man, this is a game changer for me?
Yeah. There was an artist. I don't know if he ever really got super big, but his name was Benny Marchant. He was a like a singer songwriter. And the cool thing about Benny, that audition at least, was that I connected with a gentleman named Barry Squire. God rest his soul. He recently passed, but Barry Squire was a musician contractor in LA, and he was responsible for putting a lot of guys on really big gigs. This was before Adam Blackstone. This was before all of that. You know, Barry Squire was one of those guys. It was Barry Squire and Ricky Minor. Like those were the two guys you really needed to know. And I was able to connect with Barry. I did a couple auditions for him and got both of them by the grace of God. Was able to book them both. And the first one was Benny Marchant. I got that from Barry Squire. And the Benny gig was the first gig where I was just drumming full time and I didn't have any other job outside of that, because up until then I was working regular jobs. When I came back to LA, I worked at a bank, I worked at an apartment complex as a leasing agent. You know, I definitely was on the grind, but still needed to make money, you know. And at the time I was married, you know, I had a newborn as well, so you know money still needed to be made, so I had regular jobs. But when I got the Benny gig, that was the first time I was able to let the other things go and I can just play drums full time. And that was beautiful. That was the game changing moment for me. And it wasn't a big gig at all. You know, it really, you know, we did a couple regional things. He had a record out that was already out. I didn't play on that record, but I did all the live stuff, and we were able to, you know, do a few shows in town. And he kept his band on a retainer. That was how I was able to just do that gig and not have to worry about other work.
Yeah, being able to focus full time on one thing is definitely. I've seen it over and over again when bands finally make that leap. They're all worried I can't pay my rent, that sort of thing. But you know, it's slingshots. You know, within a month or two, all of a sudden they realize that they have the full potential of their time and energy and their focus, and it
Yeah.
just gets so much better, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So you started playing full time, and then how long were you on the road, or how long did it take you then to hit the national tours, and how many years did you do that?
When I started working in LA, it took a little bit to really climb the ladder, if you will. You know, Benny was kind of a smaller gig. It was local. Then after Benny, there was a maybe a year. Was it a year? Maybe a little less than a year. I booked the David Archuleta project, and that was probably like the, oh, he's really doing it now. That did not come through Barry Squire. That came through another way. But David Archuleta was fresh off of the American Idol hype, and now he's doing his solo thing, and he's out. We're doing these big tours in Southeast Asia. That was my very first tour. And I, I tell people I got a little spoiled on my first tour because a lot of guys and ladies too, they start touring and it's usually a real low
Oh yeah.
key kind of tour. We're in a van, you know, a multi-passenger van. We're playing dive bars and, you know, clubs, and it's not super glamorous, but we're out on the road doing our thing. For me, it almost worked in reverse, right? Like David was my first tour, and I flew to. But our first date of that tour was Jakarta, Indonesia. Flew there, 17 some odd hour flight from LA to Indonesia, and we did about, I think it was a little less than a month. We were out in Asia just doing these giant rooms, man. I mean, like he was big in the States, but he was massive out there. So we're playing arenas, like arenas and stadiums. And I was like, oh my God. So that was that was pretty early in my career. I was 21 on that gig. So, you know, being able to be in those rooms was really cool. And it didn't take super long after the Benny gig had happened. I got Benny. I think I did Benny for, like I said, less than a year, and then I was on David, and I did the David project all of 2011, and we did the summer tour overseas, and then we did a Christmas tour in the States, and that's when I was able to see the difference between the two markets.
Yeah.
He was huge out there, and then we came to the States. He was still successful, but we weren't playing the same type of rooms in the States. We went down to theaters, and like nice theaters though, like really nice, nice theaters and nice clubs. But I was able to do that, and then after David, because after that tour had ended, he went off and did a mission with the Latter Day Saints. So he was out of the industry for a little while. I think they released an album so that he can still stay relevant while he was gone. But we were out of work, obviously, so I had to go find another project to get a part of. And Eric Hutchinson came after that, and I was on Eric from about 2012 to maybe mid 2013. And it was even like, and Eric was playing smaller rooms than David. Now we're still playing theaters, but they're a little smaller. The clubs are a little smaller. We're now kind of getting into the divey bar kind of vibe. Like I said, I went backwards, right? And then after Eric, I started working with this rapper named Chanel West Coast. And Chanel West Coast was on, I think she might still be on, this TV show called Ridiculousness. It's on MTV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where her bread and butter was. But she's a rapper. She was signed to Young Money, and she wanted to do this tour, and I got the call for that. And it was dive bars, like super divey. It was kind of grimy, and I was like, "Oh, this is what people do first." Got it. Yeah, pretty wild. And I was in a van. I was in a multi-passenger van. That was my first van tour. So it worked the other way around for me. But yeah, like I was going up. Like I was working with bigger names, but the rooms were getting smaller. Like until I started working with Selena and Lil Nas, and that's when everything just took off.
Yeah, no small rooms there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about drumming, the evolution of the modern drummer. Oftentimes I look back and I see that they're doing more than just playing the kit. They're triggering a lot of samples, maybe backing tracks. They got to learn Ableton. Tell me about your evolution as to, have you been tasked with any of that during your performances, and was it challenging to learn all that?
Yes, that's a great question. Excuse me. When you are pursuing a drumming career, especially in the pop, R&B, any sort of modern day type of music, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be triggering samples live on the gig. It's almost standard with everything now. It wasn't super crazy for me to learn that, because as a kid, I used to go to Guitar Center all the time and just mess around on the electronic drum kits and the pads and stuff. So I was familiar with how they felt and the sensitivity and how they played compared to just a old fashioned drum. So it didn't take me too long to figure out how to incorporate that into my playing. What was a challenge was learning how these sampling machines worked and learning how to load in samples and set EQs within the machine. And if you're playing an 808, you have to route the 808 down the sub channel in the machine. And that was the challenge for me, because I don't necessarily have an audio background, if that makes sense. I'm more of, I just play, right? Yeah. So now I'm having to learn how to load these samples and do that. So it's been an evolution for sure, but I would say every gig I've been on that is worth mentioning, I was playing samples, and I had either just a regular, like a SPD, Roland SPD pad, or more. Sometimes I had that and triggers and a KT10 pedal and everything else, especially if you're playing with an artist whose songs are just huge. You have to keep the integrity of those songs while you play the gig. So yeah, I got to play this particular snap or this whatever this effect is that they used. I have to trigger that live because that's what people want to hear. So um, it's not too bad now for me because it's on everything. Even the gig I'm doing now, Mad Apple in Las Vegas, I'm playing a hybrid kit basically, and it's just regular. It's just part of the it's part of the game now.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into Cirque du Soleil Mad Apple. Tell me about your performance setup and how that what's unique about that setup that you've encountered. Maybe even I'll follow up with a question about what are you hearing in your in ears as opposed to what the audience hears. If
Yeah.
you want to throw that in the answer too. So, Maestro, why don't you tell me about your setup for Cirque du Soleil Mad Apple?
Yeah. My setup for Mad Apple is the biggest kit I've ever played in my career. Usually my setups are they're either on the smaller side or they're just kind of like, standard, nothing too crazy. However, the show itself is so drum heavy. I have to play a larger kit. I need all of the options and the colors. And when I was chosen to play that gig, I took over for my good buddy Bruce Briggs, who's another one of my favorites of all time. And Bruce's kit, when he was on the gig, was a big kit. And he's always played a fairly large kit too. But with where the drums are set up in the theater, they're right in the middle. I'm way up in the air. It's just me on this particular platform. So you need to fill up the space. It needs to be a spectacle as well as something practical that you can actually use and play. So you got to hit the best of both worlds. But the setup itself is pretty big. I think it's an eight piece kit, kick, two snares, 14 floor, 10, 12 over here, 16, and an 18 floor tom that we converted. Pretty big kit. And I have cymbals everywhere, splashes and things like that. But electronically, I have an SPD. I have another external pad that's routed from the SPD. And I have a KT10 pedal too. That's right next to my kick drum pedal that, I go back and forth depending on what song we're playing. But the setup itself is pretty big. Everything is on a Gibraltar rack system. It's stationary because that's where the kit lives. It's not being packed up every night. It stays there, lives there. So every adjustment that I make, or if I add something, or if I take something away, or whatever the case may be, it stays. It stays. But the kit itself it's a pretty big one.
Yeah, it's a luxury to not have to move everything. Then you can go bigger. It's not a problem, not hours of setup or tuning. And maybe you can walk us through like a day in the life. Like when do you show up? Are you sound checking? Is there a lot more focus on the aesthetic? Maybe talk about what a day in the life is. You show up on a Thursday. Are you doing multiple shows? That sort of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, let's walk through a typical day. So a typical day at Mad Apple, my call time is 5:30. If I want to get there a little bit earlier, I can, but I have to give myself enough time to be there by sound check, and our sound check is at 5:40 sharp. Sharpity sharp. Like 5:40, as soon as the clock hits 5:40, the band leader, music director, he's hitting the Ableton rig, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going in for sound check, and we play the same song for sound check every night. It's the opener song that we do, but that song is great because I'm playing electronics and acoustic drums in that song, so audio is able to check all the levels and check everything. So yeah, so we sound check at 5:40. Sound check is usually not very long. We're usually wrapped up 5:45, 5:50, if that. Every blue moon, if we're adding a song to the show, we'll use that time to rehearse because the doors don't really open until about 6:30. So we have some time if we need it, but we also need to keep in mind that we need time to get into makeup and costume. And yes, makeup and costume. This is Cirque. Like we have to look the part, right? So we need enough time to do that. But as of this moment, we're not rehearsing anything. All the songs are locked in and set. So yeah, we do our sound check. We wrap by 5:45, 5:50, back to the dressing room, and now you just budget your time wisely to make sure that you are dressed and ready to go by I think by 6:50, 6:52. That's when I get called to the stage to play buckets during the
Oh,
pre-show.
cool.
So I do a bucket drumming thing with the lead singer. His name is Eddie Cole. I do something with him. We kind of just do some, just some trading, basically. We trade fours and all of that. And we're playing with the house music that the audience is hearing as they walk in. And we have our in-ears, so I'm able to, we have a feed of the music. So we're able to play with the track and do a bunch of cool bucket stuff. We'll do that for maybe 3-4 minutes. And then they'll tell us, okay, bucket drummers, you're good. We'll figure out a creative place to end, walk off the stage, and then that's my cue to go up to the platform because that's where the main kit is. It's sitting up above the stage. And I go there and then we do the show. We do a 7 o'clock show. The show is about 90 minutes. And after that, we have a little bit of a break. And then we do the same thing for 9:30. We do a 9:30 show as well. And it's the whole same routine, everything except the sound check. But we start with buckets. It's the whole thing, the whole shebang.
And is that 7 days a week or 5 days or how many?
This is 5 days. It's 5 days a week. So we go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Right now, Sunday, Monday are our dark days.
So what are you hearing in your in-ears as opposed to what the audience would hear?
In my inner mix is probably super obnoxious to the average listener. When we're actually playing the show, my metronome is like, if I can use my camera, metronome is here. Everything else is like there. It's very, very, very yes. Because listen, like my job is to drive the train, right? I have to push the band. I want the click to be guiding me so that the rest of the band doesn't need to have their click so loud. They can just listen to drums, right? So my click is rather loud, and that's always been my click level when I'm out on the road playing with an artist and we're playing with click and with in-ears. My click track is pretty loud. So the audience obviously doesn't hear the click. They hear everything else. So they're just going to hear audio. You're going to hear playback. You're going to hear all the live instruments and the singers, right? For us, it's the same, but again, heavy click. And then we have talkback in our ears as well. So I have a talkback mic if I need to connect with the music director or if we need to communicate with stage management. Each of the band members has a microphone, a designated microphone that goes right to stage management, and we can hear it amongst each other too. So I'll hear voices every now and again. People will be communicating, talking about something, especially if there's an issue or we've had to change something last minute. That's when they communicate with the band and they tell us, hey, we're going to do this, and this. Carry on, so that the audience obviously doesn't, they don't see that something is happening. That they think it's all part of the show. But yeah, that's really what's in my ears. I hear drums better in my ears than you probably would in the house. Everything is a little more direct to me, just so I can hear what's really going on. By the time the audience hears it, it's going through obviously the EQ in the front of house, and different songs are going to have different mix levels for drums for the house. But for me, the drums don't change. Everything is pretty standard.
Are you playing the same thing every night, or is there room for improvisation and feel?
That's a great question. So when I first got on this gig and I first started the project, the music director sat me down and he said, Maestro, Of all of the players in the band, you have the most room to paint. You have a canvas every night, and you can paint. With that being said, though, you still need to conduct. You still need to keep us in line, hit the hits, do the common things that we need to do every night. Obviously, be a professional, stay on top of the click. Don't do anything crazy, 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 crazy. That's just like, you know. But use your best judgment. We're all professional enough to know what that is. But he said, as far as like your drum solos, I get 2 drum solos in this show. Your drum solos and even transition fills and things like that. I don't have to play the same thing every night, and I'm so thankful I don't have to do that, because it would get so boring if I had to do that every single night. No, I change things up, and I'm able to do that, and I have the room to do that too, and it's great. It's really, really great, and it's fun because people will catch the changes and they'll say, "Oh, I heard
Really?
something that you did. That was kind of cool." And yeah, and JF, he's our music director. He has given me so much room to just let me do me, and he trusts me to do that, and I'm so grateful. There's only been one thing that I did that he told me I couldn't do anymore. And that was do I have? It's sitting over here. It's on the kit. I have a stack.
Yeah. A cymbal stack?
I have a stack.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, cymbal
Yeah.
stack. I had that stack in the theater. It sounds way different in here than it does out there. So I had that stack and I was wearing it out. And he said, "Hey, so we have some acrobats, we have some people. That sound is going to freak them out a little bit. It's so different. It's so like, and they're jumping in the air and doing stuff they don't need to be frightened by things that are happening." So I had to get rid of my stack. But other than that, it's all good.
When you're not performing, do you have time to collaborate with other artists or do session work?
I have to budget my time when we're not in shows. So I do have time to collaborate with other artists and other projects. I usually do those projects on our dark days because I have more time to do that. I just did a session literally maybe 3-4 days ago for Disney. I did a Disney thing, which was a lot of fun. The song was super cool, but I was able to do that here in the house and just record that, and it's fine because I don't have to be at Mad Apple until 5:30. So I really have most of the day to do whatever I really want to do. So yeah, as long as I can just budget the time right, I can get involved with other things. I just can't travel as much. That's the only thing I can't do.
How has social media platforms impacted you as an artist? Is it a big focus for you?
Yes. Social media is really like, that is the gateway to everything. And I can't stress that enough. I tell young guys that, and older guys, like I tell all of them, like, you have to have this if you want to work, because that's the only way people are going to know what it is that you do. The word of mouth thing is great, but it only gets you so far. You can really push your boundaries to a whole nother audience, a whole nother set of people with social media. And if your socials are good, if you have great content, the sky's the limit. The Disney session that I just did, the person who contacted me, they just sent me an email, like a blind email, because of videos they saw on Instagram. And they said, "I saw your videos. I think you'd sound great on this session. I'm doing work with Disney for this song. I think it's for a ride or whatever, but I can really use your flavor. Would you be interested?" Instagram. Yeah, social media is so important.
So you have a consistent style on Instagram, a visual style. Could you describe your aesthetic for Instagram? Was it intentional, and what how did you decide to go with that?
Yeah. So my aesthetic on Instagram, it's bright. I love colors. I love doing similar types of music. Um, I wouldn't say that it was so completely thought out at first, and then we just did a big rollout, and that's what it is. A lot of it was experimenting, really. My social media status actually started on TikTok. I had an Instagram and I was really trying to grow that. And it was kind of a slow burn. You know, I didn't really have a whole lot happening on Instagram. But then when TikTok happened, especially during the pandemic, somehow, and I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful, but TikTok really, they were the first app to really push what I was doing. And there wasn't a lot of guys who were really doing that. I was doing TV show theme song covers, and the Powerpuff Girls video was my first. That was my first video to hit 1 million views. I ain't never had 1 million anything. Like that was great. So I was able to take that engine, if you will, and I transferred that to Instagram. And I said, well, if TikTok is doing this, maybe IG will sort of do the same thing. And surprisingly, it did. And now it's almost like it's reversed in a way. Now TikTok is sort of kind of leveled off. Okay, cool. But now my Instagram is really just popping. But the aesthetic and just the look of it all, it started on TikTok. Even with making covers and trying to think of interesting ways to advertise whatever this song is or this video that I'm doing, that started there, and then it transferred to Instagram. And now I love playing with colors. I love looking at things and seeing what pops. I feel like as a content creator, you need to have sort of a visual eye. You need to think about marketing. You need to think about, okay, what's going to actually pop up and pop off this page, what's going to grab the listeners, the viewers attention. So I think about all of those things when I'm creating that aesthetic.
Pretty easy interview. You killed it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad to do it, man. Thank you for your time as well. Yeah, sounds
all right,
good.
thanks, Maestro. Have a great afternoon.
All right, see you guys later.